All right, Frank Gaffney's with me, Executive Chairman of the Center for Security Policy, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Present Danger China, securefreedom.org, counterjihad.com, presentdangerchina.org. Frank, I got a number of stories to get to with you this week, per usual. But first, the big topic last hour, I'm sure you got a taste of it, is a lot of strong reactions to Alexander Vindman, the latest, anti-Trump guy who's testifying against the president on his dealings and tactics with Ukraine and showing up to the SCIF for these secret dungeon hearings and in full military uniform. This was, he did this obviously to get inoculated from criticism from folks like me. The problem is that I've got a whole audience of veterans, and they all called him pretty outraged over it. Did you have a reaction? Had you heard anything about this, or do you have any thoughts?
What occurred to me, Alex, was that this was kind of, in a way, perhaps unconscious, but nonetheless a bit of a reprise of Oliver North's famous appearance when he, a member of the staff of the National Security Council under President Reagan, was summoned up to Capitol Hill. And the difference was, of course, Oliver North was in uniform, raising his right hand famously to take the oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, in support of the president's policies, as opposed to for the purpose of essentially disagreeing with them, I think, rather than finding any particular illegality or impeachable offense. The Vindman testimony suggests he simply disagrees with the president's approach to Ukraine. And he's entitled to do that, but I think that the uniform should not inoculate him from criticism, is the bottom line.
Sure. Well, and what's interesting to me is what inoculates him from criticism, and it actually inoculates him from praise in some ways, is that we can't see the hearing. Like, we don't know what he said. There's no cross-examination.
We know what he said, Alex. We know that it was devastating. It was just absolutely, scorching. Trust me. The Schiff selection of what he said is all you really need to know, don't you think?
Frank, I don't know if this just makes me old school, but I would rather just hear from him directly than hear what partisans with blue check marks on their name tweet about.
No. This is so passé.
I don't
Alex,
know.
Really, you've got to get with the program.
Way, but I'd rather just hear from the guy.
Yeah, make up your own mind. You know, the old Groucho Marx line about who you're going to believe, me or your own lying eyes. No, please. You need to listen to Congressman Schiff and just be quiet.
Yeah, that's right.
It's an occupational hazard for a talk show host, of course.
That came up with a couple of callers, which is that he's probably an impressive guy. We don't really know. We just know he's the type of guy who'd show up unnecessarily in his military uniform, and he doesn't like the way Trump handles Ukraine. Right. Those are the only data points we have. Oh, and that if we do criticize him, then we're chicken SHITs, according to MSNBC. So did she mean chicken hawks when Nicole Wallace was doing that, Producer Paul? She was calling people who criticize him chicken SHITs, Frank. I mean, it's just so not persuasive. And they have to persuade a few of us. They're not going to get you or me, but they got to get a few people who like the president to support impeachment if they're going to take this all the way. So
Alex,
they're not going
to aside,
if we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, the serious point you're making, and that all of us should be making, is what is in process here is the single most traumatic thing that can happen in a constitutional republic like ours, and that is the removal of the elected President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, Chief Executive, and we're asked to believe on the basis of, as you say, this dungeon, examination or star chamber, if you will, kangaroo court, that it's all that Adam Schiff says it is, and that's not right, it's not fair to the president, and it's most especially not suitable for the purpose of this exercise with respect to the American people and their rights, to their need to know.
I was just thinking, I'm just picturing like Schiff and people pleading with him, and I bet people in his personal life say to Pencil Neck, please save us from the bad orange. And it's just he must be so bubbled. Like, he just must not understand that a lot of us think the president's doing a pretty good job. It's just I don't. It's just so disheartening, Frank, because where do we go from here? And you don't need to answer because I want to talk about serious stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just, where do we go from here? When we're talking about a witch hunt, and I kind of get annoyed when everyone keeps saying witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt, but of course that's what it is, and it's been that way since not even day one. My colleague on the station, Andrew Wilkow, pointed out impeachment talks started in April 2016, 6 months before we voted.
Look, Alex, could I just, I know we need to move on, but just a last thought on this. It's not a witch hunt. It's a coup. This is a deadly serious effort to deprive a man who was elected of the power that was entrusted to him and to redistribute it to his political enemies. Full stop. And if we don't get our head around that, if we don't understand that this is really just, 4.0 in this series of coups, we're really missing the point, and we're underestimating the deadly serious character of the people who are trying to perpetrate it.
Sure, and witch hunt is actually an understatement too, because the witches in the famous witch trials got to face their own accusers. So
they did.
Also another point. So, which of course
not terribly satisfactorily, it might be said, but they did have that due process.
A slight improvement. So, Frank, a golf clap to you, my friend. Senator Rubio has introduced legislation to prohibit federal pension plans from investing in Chinese stocks. I will tell you flat out, this is one where I'm not a good Don King. I'm not a good hype man. This would not be happening without the work of Frank Gaffney and Breitbart News. Do you have any thoughts on this particular legislation Rubio introduced? But this is your project. This is your issue, Frank, and congrats for getting this far.
Oh, well, listen, thank you for those attaboys, but truthfully, I need to salute people like Roger Robinson and, Steve Bannon and Kyle Bass and Chris Iacovella at the American Securities Association. These are the people who've really been on point in raising the alarm, as we've been able to do just essentially in reporting on their work with the Committee on the Present Danger of China with you for the past couple of weeks, Alex. But this legislation by Marco Rubio is very important in its own right, but also because it's part of a growing effort of members of Congress. There are 6 of them in the Senate who joined, 5 others who joined Marco Rubio in a bipartisan effort just this past week to try to get the board that oversees the Thrift Savings Plan, which, again, it's a little bit of inside baseball, but it's basically the retirement plan for the U.S. government, for its civilian and military personnel, past and present. And as we've been talking about, Alex, this program is about to be put in really harm's way, I believe, because it will require military personnel and others, if they want a diversified international portfolio, to invest in Chinese companies, some of whom are building the weapon systems designed to kill those same people, those same American servicemen and women. This is, in short, insane, and I commend Senator Rubio and Senator Shaheen and others who have stepped forward. The Secretary of the Navy, by the way, Richard Spencer, wrote a terrific op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal last week decrying this idea of the Thrift Savings Plan Board. But it is not turning it around so far. They had a meeting this Monday, and they decided that they were just going to keep on keeping on, at least until their next meeting in November. So I hope this legislation, Alex, I hope this chorus that is growing in really adamant and I think quite warranted opposition to such a crazy idea, and really it's a fiduciarily misbegotten idea too, because these companies are not transparent. There's real material risk that's not being disclosed. Anyway, thank you for shouting me out, but there's so much more going on here, and I really want to salute my team at the Committee on the Present Danger of China, and hopefully with the help of your team Alex. If they'll go to presentdangerchina.org, there is a petition there that we urge them to join us in signing and sending to the President and to the Congress in opposition to this effort to put our government employees' pensions in real jeopardy on behalf of Chinese companies that are highly malevolent.
Okay, so Frank, by the way, you're an even worse hype man than I am. 100% behind this, and yet, no, we'll just give everyone else but me credit.
It's true.
It's good stuff. PresentDangerChina.org, and call your congressman, call your senators on this one.
Please.
This is
it's their money too, for heaven's sakes. That's the irony.
It sure is, and this is just the fact that our pensions, federal pensions, funding China, which means funding the Communist Party, is an outrage. And I try, Frank, not to be hysterical on the show, so when I announce something and say outrage, hopefully people take me seriously. This is an outrage, and it seems like a very simple one to fix. So
Amen.
Let's do this, and make Frank the hero that Frank has always been in my mind.
Well,
okay, Frank, let's go on. Speaking of China, I have one, and I know I'm risking on Conservative Talk Radio a get off my lawn moment, but Taylor Swift, who is very woke about the president and Marsha Blackburn and people on the right, will be performing in Shanghai for Chinese billionaires. So, did you catch that one?
I hope she toes the party line, is all I can say, because she will find it goes poorly if she doesn't.
It is just so unbelievable that the left, who is so concerned over relatively minor perceived injustices in the United States, in the spirit of LeBron James, all of a sudden they have no opinion when it comes to Chinese oppression. We learned of a drunken Chinese police officer beating a Uyghur Muslim to death yesterday. We learned about that. But there's no outrage about this stuff, Frank, coming from our American media class. And I don't find it acceptable. You have to choose. Either just keep your mouth shut, shut up and sing, and shut up and dribble, or if you're going to decide to use your celebrity to get your voice out there, then if you're going to call out Marsha Blackburn, you should also be calling out Xi Jinping. Oh, wait a minute, Xi Jinping starts cutting checks, and then all of a sudden you're not as woke as you were 5 minutes ago.
Right. Well, as they like to say, Alex, it's complicated. It's complicated by the fact that they're getting immense amounts of money from the Chinese communists.
Yeah, I've got to educate myself.
There you go. There you go. You're not educated enough.
Do people understand? Do you think, Frank, if I went down to Washington Circle, relatively near where I am right now, and I just started, stopping people and saying, do you know that the Chinese government is completely controlled by the Communist Party, and that Xi Jinping's number one priority in his life is to be the leader of the Communist Party, not to lead the people of China, as Michael Bloomberg would suggest, that he's not accountable to them. He's accountable first and foremost to the Communist Party. And it's indistinguishable. If you read Newt Gingrich's latest book, Trump versus China, it's so clear that Stalinism and Leninism is so deeply ingrained in the Chinese Communist Party in present day. Do you think 4%, do you think 1% are aware of that? We're so ignorant on this topic, Frank.
We are. You happen to pick a geographic location that is adjacent to the George Washington University, so you might get up to 5%. I don't know, but let's face it, most of us are clueless about the true nature of communism over its history, and that's every bit as true. In fact, I would argue, Alex, that what the Chinese communists are now bringing to bear, in part, by the way, through companies like Hikvision, which is one of the companies that our investor class and perhaps our government employees are going to be investing in enabling. That's the company that is producing the surveillance state technologies that the Chinese are using to take totalitarianism to an unbelievably, almost unimaginably, horrifically comprehensive level. And this is the thing that you got to ask yourself, don't woke people get this? Don't even our educated elites understand that that isn't just, Swedish socialism for which they have this misplaced nostalgia. This is full-on tyranny. And what it is doing to the people of China, most especially, religious minorities, Christians, Falun Gong, the Uyghurs, Tibetans, and the like, but the people of China more generally. And get this, Alex, Hike Vision and the Chinese Communist Party now have this so-called social credit score system, this comprehensive totalitarian technology-based system on offer for export to other countries around the world as well. So this is really a monstrosity. And the fact that we're not addressing it as such, let alone really doing everything we can to stop it, is going to be looked back in history as one of the great errors, up there with people failing to stop Adolf Hitler when it was easy to do.
Frank, okay, let's continue with another project that you've worked on for a very long time, is raising awareness about Christian persecution globally, the most persecuted religion currently on planet Earth. And Southeast Asia has become a hot spot. We've had some reporting on this over the last week or so, Breitbart News. How bad is it? What do we need to know?
Well, again, thank you for the work you and Francis Martel are doing on this, Alex. It is so vital. You covered, among other things, this new report from Group Aid to the Church in Need, which is putting a spotlight, particularly, as you say, on what's happening in South Asia and China, most especially North Korea, with respect to Christian persecution. What's happening here is simply unimaginable. And it's happening in our time, on our watch. Think about this. By some estimates, essentially the same number of people, if you added up every man, woman, and child in the United States of America today, the same number is being persecuted around the world simply because they follow Jesus Christ. We've put together an effort to try to help the myriad other groups that are working to relieve the suffering of these people. We call it a grassroots movement. It's very much in the early days, but that's what we aspire to be, called Save the Persecuted Christians. People can find out more about it at savethepersecutedchristians.org. This group is designed to try to help bring about pressure to hold accountable the people doing this persecuting. And while a lot is happening in Asia, by the way, 80% of what's happening is being done by Sharia supremacists in the Middle East and in Africa, among other parts of the world. Also, by the way, in Asia, the Sharia supremacists are at work there too. But the problem is, Alex, that mostly we have been either completely ignorant of the magnitude of this nightmare, or indifferent to it. And that must stop. And I'm so appreciative of what I know is the personal commitment to this regard of President Trump and of Vice President Pence and of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and of Ambassador Sam Brownback, the Ambassador for International Religious Freedom. These guys are terrific. The deep state in the American government, not so much. But this is something that we really need your help with in identifying and countering as much as we can.
Okay, so how do we do that again? Give us that website again.
SaveThePersecutedChristians.org.
Okay,
Become part of the
Frank,
movement.
we haven't had a chance to talk about the Baghdadi raid and how significant that is. Give me your 30,000 foot on how big of a deal this is.
Well, I had a very interesting conversation just now, Alex, with a man that I very highly regard in this region, Dr. Harold Rode, longtime sort of duty expert on the Middle East and the Pentagon. And he made the point that it's not just that this was an extraordinarily effective demonstration of American power in decisively taking down this very bad guy in very difficult circumstances, dangerous circumstances. But he said the message that has gone forth, particularly to people like the mullahs of Iran, that kind of reach could be used decisively against them as well, in the furtherance of what I think has to be our prime focus of effort in the Middle East at this moment, which is ending this horrific regime in Iran, which is threatening the entire region, our interests as well as those of Israel and many others besides. This isn't to say we want large numbers of boots on the ground, but there are people like Qassem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, who should be shaking in his boots over the fact that we demonstrated the capacity to reach out and touch him, and I hope we will. And if we do, I think that there's a chance that we will see some very, very important changes in the character of the problems that currently afflict not just the Middle East, but much the rest of the world as a result as well.
Good, Frank. So what did you make of the reaction worldwide? Russia says it doubts that the raid actually took place. China said the United States is a disruptive force in the Middle East. It is if they are trying to have us enjoy ourselves more, because this sort of sour grapes is very amusing to those of us who are thrilled about the news about the death of Baghdadi. Your thoughts?
Well, it just is a reminder that they're not on our team. That's for sure. We've talked a lot about China and Russia too, Alex, and I think this refusal to acknowledge that extraordinary reach and power of the United States is hardly surprising from people who really want to diminish it, or for that matter, end it, and replace it with their own power, their own reach. These are hostile powers, and I think have to be regarded as such and treated as such.
All right, Frank, and the last one, luckily we haven't been forced to spend a ton of time on the Democrats the last few days, but I did catch one that the producers and I wanted to bring up. Bernie Sanders speaking to the J Street organization on Monday, which is a far-left Jewish group, suggesting that giving some of Israel's aid to Gaza, which is run by Hamas, which are terrorists. I thought this was worthy of comment from you, and now is the time to comment.
Yeah, well, just very quickly, this is just one more example of Bernie Sanders' rabid anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Giving money to Hamas under present circumstances is a formula for killing Israelis. Just make no mistake about it. It's strategically misbegotten. It would be highly counterproductive to any actual prospects for ameliorating the plight of the people of Gaza, who suffer terribly at the hands of this terrorist group, in part because they use all of the money that they have and all of the money that they're given to build means of destroying Israelis. They're not interested in the betterment of the people of Gaza. The best thing that could be done for the people of Gaza is to get rid of Hamas. And that, by the way, is one of the things that I think is being helped along by President Trump's increasingly intense sanctions on Iran, which gives money to the Sunnis of Hamas simply because they're killing Jews. And interestingly enough, I want to say, I don't often get to say it, I'm appreciative of Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin's comment that they're going to continue to ramp up those sanctions on Iran. I think that's exactly right, and a much more sensible strategy than what Bernie Sanders is saying to this rabidly anti-Israel group, J Street, which is sometimes presented as a pro-Israel or at least Jewish organization. It is as anti-Semitic as they come.
Yeah, give us a little more detail on that, because this is one where I think it's kind of like got an SPLC vibe to it, where I think a lot of people realize how far left and partisan they are.
Well, this is a George Soros project, among others. It is something that he's, by the way, trying to do to American Christian evangelicals as well. It's an effort to divide and conquer. It was a direct response to organizations like AIPAC and most especially the Zionist Organization of America that have been pro-Israel over the years. AIPAC is a bit of a mixed bag these days just because of what's happening to Democratic Jews. But the point is that J Street is intended as a threat to the Jewish community in the United States and its longstanding and obviously needed support for the state of Israel. It's Soros, it's leftists, it's I think actually as well sort of the Islamists that make up the red-green axis that are cheering on J Street, and Bernie Sanders is sucking up to them in the hopes that he'll have their support, and God help us if he gets anywhere near the White House.
Frank Gaffney, wonderful. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. SecureFreedom.org, CounterJihad.com, PresentDangerChina.org. One more time for the Save the Persecuted Christians website, Frank.
It's just SaveThePersecutedChristians.org. Join us in a movement to save the persecuted Christians, please.
So important, and Frank is so ahead in so many of these issues, as you guys know, which is why we invite him on every week. And we'll talk to you next Wednesday, Frank. Thank you.
Bless you, Alex. Thank you.
We'll be right back.